Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the Compliancy Guys. We have a couple of really great guest speakers today, and we're going to talk a little bit about vCISO services and anyways, so let me introduce David. So David is from Tsunami, right? I'm pronouncing that correct? Is that correct?
Cynomi.
Tsunami, and rather than take up the whole time, I can allow David an opportunity to just introduce himself, right? So I'm going to, go ahead, take a second, introduce yourself.
Okay, perfect. Do you see me? Because I see myself freezing. Okay, so I'm David. I'm the CEO of Cynomi. Okay. But most of my, let's say, professional life was in the public sector. I'm Lieutenant Colonel from 8200 unit, which is intelligence unit in Israel, doing cyber. So I really cannot speak about that. After that, I've been in a cybersecurity authority in Israel, which do completely the opposite. Protection of the civilian space, critical infrastructure, mid-market, and of course SMBs. I'm electrical engineer by my profession, also have a PhD in signal processing, doing it at CERN, Geneva, trying to find those times the Higgs boson, the God particle.
Wow.
We finally found it, but nobody invited me to the ceremony for the Nobel Prize.
Oh, that's too bad. So you did find it, right? Can you share that with me and where it is, right? So we can talk about that after. But so you've certainly had a full background in a lot of things in and around security, especially over there where you are. And whereabouts in Israel are you? Just like geographically, north, south, kind of dead center?
Yeah, in Tel Aviv, in center of the
Gotcha.
Nice city. Cynomi is a nice city called Herzliya, which on the beach. So
nice.
Yeah, we can do cyber. We call it from fishing to fishing.
Awesome. So we do have the chat and the Q&A open. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for giving us your background there. If you do have questions, little housekeeping along the way, just post them in chat. There is the Q&A section, which if anytime I'm on a Zoom as a participant, the Q&A kind of drives me nuts. You can post in chat. I'd rather answer them there. If there is something, of significance, we may pause along the way and kind of answer your questions live along the way. But the real goal for today is just to talk about, a virtual CISO. And for those of you that aren't necessarily aware, like, what is a CISO, right? We spend a lot of time in this MSP space with mouthfuls of acronyms, and being a dyslexic guy, it gets to tend to be a little crazy for dealing with too many acronyms. But hey, Steve, you're here. Why don't you tell us what you think CISO is and what you think that role sort of does?
Well, so for me, a CISO is a leader, right? Who's defining the strategy for the organization that they run. So they're the top person when it comes to the buck stops there for security.
And so if I had to put this into context, right, thinking about an organizational structure, like the CEO's job is to go find more money, right? The CTO, the technology officer, is to make sure things are running and you have the right stack and you have the right tools and technologies. But the ISO is all about data, right? All about securing that data, all about understanding the information, right? Am I missing something? Something a little bit more maybe you want to expand on, David?
Yeah, I think data is the most important thing. So protection, but it's not only data. Actually, I think it's the functionality of the organization. So it might be ransomware. It's just things are not working, or it could be website defacement. Nothing is wrong with maybe the display of your website is wrong, but nobody touched your data. So it's more like taking your data, changing your data, ruining your data, or just don't give an access to your data.
I see. Yeah, and that's kind of how I see it as well. I'm sure those in the audience might see that as well. Obviously, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. But so, as a managed service provider, MSP or MSSP or whatever other acronym you'd like to use to define yourself, I find myself in this kind of role working with our clients, right? And I wish Alex was here, because Alex and I from Lifecycle Insights, we've had a lot of great conversations around the role of a CISO versus the role of an account manager, and sort of the delineation of those two, right? And I think, as you pointed out, needing to have a little bit more of that security background, technologist background, but also some of that business sense, right? And companies, they can spend a lot of money trying to hire somebody internally. And then there's been, that overhead and vacations and dealing with all of that kind of stuff. But so then there's been this shift in the virtual CISO, right? So maybe you could talk a little bit about like the virtual CISO, how Tsunami might be able to help with that, and kind of things around, how that has shifted from, do we need one? Yes or no? And like, what does that look like, and how us as MSPs can offer those services to our clients?
Wow, so lots of questions. So it's a long answer.
Yeah.
So I think that the life has been changed for the last 18 months. So we see that there are much more attacks on small and medium businesses, also on MSPs. And I guess the statistic says that it's about 60% of small and medium businesses are getting hit from attacks. And if you take not only that, but also the compliance that we have more and more. Actually, what is surprising in Israel, that privacy compliance is the leader, because for privacy you need more security. So this is another thing. SMBs become the target for an attackers. It's not just only enterprise, but really a target. And we see lots of ransomware that really try to get to as many SMBs that they can, because they are less protected. So there is a big opportunity for attackers with the SMB space. So it's compliance, it's attacks, and also requirements from customers, because we understand that supply chain is an issue. And supply chain means that you don't only have to protect yourself, you must be sure that your suppliers are protected as well. And we all know the Kaseya thing, and we all know the other lot of attacks recently. So when you want to do a business with a bank, with insurance, with any big companies, high-tech companies, you get a very long list of requirements. It's like a compliance, but different compliance from different companies. Right. So if we take all these reasons for being more secured, I think that it changed. The world is changed, and SMBs understand that they must be protected. There is less ignorance. We are not in a situation where all the small and medium businesses are willing to pay a lot of money for security, but I think that the conversation has been changed. So there is more opportunities for MSPs to get more money, or to sell more services, security services from the SMBs. And when we talk about these services, it's really a question which services you should provide to the customer. And this is a very tricky question because there is a lot of constraints, time constraint and budget constraint. And then the question is what to do. And I have many examples. Maybe I'll give you one example of one technology company startup that asked Cynomi to tell us what they have to do. So in the past, you could say, okay, antivirus and firewall, and that's it. But now they say, okay, is it enough to put an EDR? Maybe an EDR that have an MDR as well.
Right.
But then let's talk about mail security. Okay, but what about the SaaS products? And actually, do you know where all your data is located? No, they don't know.
It's funny that you say that, because as you keep seeing on my LinkedIn, I keep posting, hey, it's 3:15 on a Wednesday. Where is your data, right? Whether it's a SaaS product or not, right? So there's definitely a lot to unpack. You mentioned a couple of key things, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, and we'll continue this like example in a second. But one of the key things that I honed in on was supply chain risk, right? You know, things like SolarWinds and Kaseya, and heck, you know, Passportal went down yesterday. IT Glue's gone up and down. Like all of these various things that us as MSP use as tools to help not only manage ourselves, but manage our clients, right? And, you know, any one of them can be the weakest link. You know, Passportal is the most recent one from yesterday. Passportal was down for a while, right? So MSPs were having a hard time getting in to do stuff because they couldn't access their passwords and so on and so forth. But the reality of this whole supply chain and all this interconnectedness of stuff, like, it's not new. What is new is now people are paying attention to it, right? Now, you know, our evil and gangs like that are paying attention to looking for those exploits, right? Take out one big MSP, you've got thousands of, you know, endpoints after that. Whereas going after the mom and pop shop, yeah, you might get 6 or 10 computers or whatever, but going after the MSP, it's a bigger fish to fry. And, you know, there's a lot of talk right now at the federal level about protecting the supply chain. And I think as far as us in this CISO role, being aware of the changing environment of where these attacks are coming from, right? And then educating our clients and putting in the protections around that, right? Like you said, it's not just antivirus and a firewall anymore. And it's more from, I think, what Steve said in the beginning, a leadership perspective, right?
Yeah, totally agree. And if I may,
David, I'm going to have you turn your camera on and off again, because it just looked like a black screen for the moment, and see if that helps bring your video back online. And if it doesn't, we'll just keep going. Hey, there you are. Or whatever. So you are a little frozen on the video, but that's fine. We'll just keep going.
I'm still frozen?
A little bit, but that's fine. I'd rather not stop. Let's just keep going. So you were moving on to like the role, and you were going to give us an example of a company that you were working with about, you know, the services that Tsunami has to offer. So why don't you continue with that kind of example, right?
Yeah. So when I started to ask about the data, so I asked them, well, okay, they told me they only have the data in AWS. And then I asked about the email. So Office 365, in the code, GitHub. And the software engineers have their own software and SaaS that they are using, and HubSpot. So many, and MongoDB, so in other tenants. And actually, they are using Azure as well for the lab. So it's so many sources. And if you want to protect your data, and we talked about protection of the data, you must understand where it is. And then after you understand where the data is, you should understand what's about passwords, because you could have an EDR, you could have email protection, but use password of 6 digits or something like that. So you must have policies. What about recovery, backups? So there are so many things that you have to think about, and I think there is no one who can speak about, who knows everything. And I think this is the place where the CISO comes in. And the CISO is someone who has the leadership, understand actually what questions should be asked, and having access to all the other experts that really understand how this company should be protected. So, and I think that the situation currently is that many companies rely on best practices in France, asking friends what they have to do, or taking some a package of email security, EDR, and maybe awareness, and then you think that you are protected.
Right.
But you don't have segmentation, and you don't have policy groups and passwords, and there are so many, and you have RDP port which is open.
So
and,
I'm shameless plug, right? So one of the things that you mentioned is us as MSPs recognizing that we may not have the human capital and expertise in-house. And if we do, that person may be stretched too thin. But where does that individual go? So the first question is do you have that capability in-house? Yes or no? And if you do, like, how does that person continue to grow their own awareness around all of this stuff, right? That's where the community pieces come in, right? That's where things like the compliancy guys in our peer group and those things, sorry, shameless plug, that's where those pieces can come in, is having a group of like-minded professionals to bounce thing off of. I mean, you see this all the time on Slack and Discord and Reddit and Facebook and LinkedIn and all the socials. Like, somebody in our MSP or MSSP space goes to one of these platforms and asks the masses for info on whatever it might be. And that's where, the idea of a peer group is really like being able to hone in and working with individuals like us and David and the rest of them around your own personal growth, which will then only benefit the MSP and ultimately benefit the MSP's clients, right? And I think, those are really key and important things. So tell me a little bit about where you might see, Tsunami's mission and passion in protecting and kind of falling into that kind of structure.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do in Cynomi, let's begin with our vision. So we think that every company, and we now understand why it's every company, because the attackers are going after every company, should be protected. We understand that protection is complicated. You must use experienced guy or girl in order to protect. So you need someone. Let's call him or her a CISO or ISO. And we understand that it's quite expensive to have a full-time CISO. It can reach to $200,000 a year, maybe more, maybe little bit less. And not only it's expensive, it's not an easy job to find one and experience one. So companies understand that, and big companies have CISO, and smaller companies, but still big, can get a virtual CISO or fractional CISO, which is maybe 2 days of helping with a CISO, maybe 1 day, maybe half a day. I remember a case in Israel where insurance company used the CISO half a day. They count on him, but in half a day, you cannot do much. Right. You cannot enforce policies, and then they've been hacked, a very famous hack in Israel for an insurance company that holds governmental documents, etc. So our mission is to give the ability for small companies to have professional security like a CISO. We will never be able to replace a CISO. There are so many things to know, maybe in 20 years. You need such an AI and to take big decisions. However, we think that lots of the work of the CISO can be automated. And we can take, or we can help an existing cyber expert to do much more. For example, doing automatic risk assessment, automatic policy generation, and not only automatic, but tailor-made. We understand the company and we just make it right. And what is the most important thing is to help this expert to generate task prioritization. What is more and what is less important. For MSPs that don't have any chief information security officer and they cannot afford the help of MSSP, we think that Cynomi can be a good starting point. We try to be very friendly, to speak in a language of the IT, compose policies, make vulnerability assessment, try to take all the information from questionnaires for scanning and give clear and simple insights. So that's what we are trying to do. We are working with channels, with MSPs, with MSSPs, and we're trying to give them the ability to provide affordable, CISO-like security service.
Nice. So I'm trying to think, tell me a little bit about like how, Tsunami came into existence, right? Like your mission,
Yeah.
what do you do? Tell me a little bit about, Tsunami's background.
Okay. So everything began when I met my co-founder and good friend, which Israeli that lives in the UK. He established he studied the MBA in Oxford University, and then he stayed there for 6 years to establish the software incubator. And after that, he established his own company, and I was his cyber advisor.
And that's Iran, right? Who's on the call with us?
It's Roy.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I thought he was on the call. My bad. Continue.
Okay, so when he got his first requirements for customers, we talk about supply chain, and when he understood that his company could be attacked, he asked me what to do, and I was amazed to talk with software engineers, really clever guys that did all the possible mistakes. And after fixing all these vulnerabilities and having a nice report, etc., we understood that maybe he's not the only one. So we started with the startup community, but then we realized that it's worse situation in other sectors. Law firms, e-commerce, any vertical that you pick suffers, and we thought that it shouldn't be so difficult to give some automation or some SaaS product that finally goes to the SMB market. And I must tell you that it is not the straightforward. We are coming from Israel, the nation of startups and cyber startup. So many, there are about 500 startups cyber startup in Israel. Most of them go to the enterprise, and we are just few that go to the SMB because we know it's tough. The awareness is less than in the enterprise, but I think that our vision and our mission was so strong that we really want to make the difference. We have shortly understood that the way to SMBs is going through MSPs. Actually, the same is in Israel. So we have several MSPs that we are working in Israel, several in the UK, and now we are approaching the US.
I see. So you've talked a lot about your organizations in Israel that you're working with. You don't necessarily need to divulge how many or whatever, but I presume you have organizations here that are US based that you're working with, and you're trying to bring in sort of more of that in your current space. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Good, because obviously all the MSPs that are on here now are all US based. So I know we're spending a lot of time discussing your existing client base in Israel, but I want to make sure, like, hey, we're also doing this in the United States, and this is how we can help you based in the US.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, currently, we've just launched our new version last week, and we already onboarded about 6 MSPs in this last week. So we are here and now, working with the US. Actually, Yoel and Iran, which is here, the only job is giving the companies, the MSPs that are working with us, a big success with having more protection to the customers, and of course more businesses as well. So yeah, we are here. We are looking forward to succeed in the US, and actually we have a lot of tools and know-hows. And I think one of our mission is that we see a lot of local companies, cyber companies, MSPs for MSPs, CISOs for CISOs, but we are taking the experience that we have from the different aspects of cybersecurity, my background and other friends, our VP R&D, which is also from the Cybersecurity Authority, and lots of experts of cybersecurity, CISOs that are working with us, and we really want to make the change for MSPs and SMBs. We understand that there is a gap, and we are willing to help, to understand the new gaps, the new things that are necessary for these MSPs, and to do our best to succeed and to help. Really happy to be with the compliance guys, understanding the needs, the compliant needs, the cyber needs, the supply chain needs.
Awesome. So there's a question in the chat. How important is continuous scanning for maintaining security posture?
Yeah, so for us, it's important. It's really important because that's what we are doing, and so it's part of our product. But seriously, we understand that there is lots of changes from both sides. From outside, the attacker side that always find new vulnerabilities. So you can scan your system, and then you scan it about 1 week or 2 weeks, and you find new vulnerabilities because the things are changed. So you already know that Microsoft has a weekly update, etc., of vulnerabilities. So it's not only Microsoft. And from the other hand, in all companies, there is changes in the IT infrastructure. It could be a new employee that joined the company, a new employee that quit the company. And I have a really nice story. I don't know how much time we have to talk about.
Yeah, we have time.
Yeah, perfect. So
anecdotes are always fun.
Yeah, it's a really cool one. So I always start this anecdote saying that I have a friend, his name is Guy, and he's a very lucky guy because his company was cyber attacked only 3 times this year. and I'm going to talk about the third attack he got.
Okay.
And every time it's different type of attacks. So this time we are talking not about external attacker, but internal one, ex-employee. And what happened in this company is that they had a product, not a very sophisticated one, database product. And each of the customer has, of course, a username and password to get in and to ask questions about, it's more like a research platform.
Okay.
And sometimes, as you know, the customers can forget the password. And the procedure that they call the company, the support, and they said, okay, what is my password? And then the support goes to a database or a file system, opens a file, clear text file with all the passwords and the usernames, and tell them what was the password. And of course, all the employees knows where are the passwords and usernames.
Fun.
And this ex-employee wanted to still use this to use this data and actually give it to some competitor. So he was clever enough not to use his credentials, but he get in to the system because nobody deleted his account because there is no HR processes. We talked so much about tools and processes, but we haven't talked about all the HR processes. So you should delete the user when he is no longer in your company. So he get into the system to the same place where they keep all these credentials, took another employee. He took an employee because employee had a privileged access and can download lots of data. And then he used that to load lots of data, and he did it, I think, for 2 months.
Wow.
Till the company detected that something is wrong because they didn't have a proper logging system. And after they did that, they thought that the wrong man was doing it because they of course detected that, yeah, and the police was involved, and yes.
So that's a great example of insider threat, right? And so, and you know, pardon my French, piss poor designing on their database systems, right? And so when we talked earlier about supply chain risk and what just came out a couple days ago, which is, you know, software supply and software development and pieces around how you're actually writing your code and the ability to get into that, like all of these things are just keep coming at us day after day to protect situations just like this, right? You know, I think, and you know, don't quote me if I'm wrong, but part of the SolarWinds thing was there was a default password someplace or an easy guessable password someplace that then, you know, all across all the networks because they had the ability to get into that, you know, not, you know, clear text or whatever. So these insider threats are actually real. I mean, you just pointed out yet another example of you know, being able to get data, right? Hey, it's now 3:38, where's your data? Being able to get data and then use that to their advantage, right? And it's not, even, it couldn't even just be, you know, encryption and, you know, current Bitcoin and currency and ransom and all that stuff. It could be just in this case, like that ex-employee is now taking intellectual property from that previous employer and providing that information to competitors, right? So while we talk a lot about ransomware and getting encrypted and having to do, you know, Bitcoin and all this other stuff, like there's a whole nother layer here of stuff that I haven't seen a lot of conversation around in the cyberspace, and that is the release of intellectual property to competitors, right, to other organizations. We talk about devices and things getting encrypted and having to pay money or data leakage or that data being dumped on, wherever, but there isn't, and I'm sure it happens a lot more than we're aware of with, Sally's secretary gets mad, has access to information, takes that information and goes to a new employer with it and says, here's all the competitors list. I mean, and I just saw this happen. So as a federal government contractor, I have a bunch of different RFP sites that I watch, that I manage, blah, blah, blah. RFP came out yesterday for a particular piece of work. And the organization that put out the RFP had one document with the statement of work and another document with all of their vendors, all of the contact information for all of their vendors, name, address, phone number, city, state, email address, title, blah, blah, blah. It's basically a data dump of, I don't want to say LinkedIn, but it's a data dump of their like top 500 suppliers. Like they just made that an Excel document right on the RFP website that you don't even have to log in and get. And I could literally, well, I wanted to see what it was because it's part of the RFP. And and the minute I opened it up and I was like, holy crap, this is like, I don't want to say PII. In a sense it is because it has email address, but they just dumped 500 vendors worth of information on some public government or, state or local or federal website for anybody looking at this RFP to now know not only who they're bidding against, but who's actually working with them. I did email them and be like, hey, you probably want to take that list down. but the point was, even inadvertently, they took what could be considered internal, intellectual property, for lack of better terms, a client contact list, a vendor list of all the information, and just dump that on the internet in this RFP without even thinking about the ramifications of, now I know the 500 other companies that could be bidding on this work and what they were actually getting. There wasn't pricing, but the point is, even if it's a rogue employee trying to do something maliciously, or in the case of this RFP, inadvertently doing a data dump and not necessarily understanding the full breadth of what that impact could be. I mean, I see Ray on the call here, right? So Ray works, Ray is CEO at OIT VOIP. I could imagine, Ray, what would happen if, Sean, because we love Sean, just happened to take your CRM database and dump it on the internet. How bad would that be? Right? And not that he would do that, but inadvertently or whatever, like that would just be awful. So anyways, I see there's a couple more questions coming in. Let me circle back over here real quick. Oh yeah, the cybersecurity stuff. So David, there's a question in chat. If you want to read it, I'm not going to reread it out loud, but it has to deal with Israel cyber policies and how it can help. So why don't you give that a quick read, and then
I have some problem. Do you hear me?
I do.
Do you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I have some problem in application memory, so I could not reset the computer now, so I cannot read. I just so can you read it? And I
so let me just read it to you, right? And I'm gonna probably spit my words out, but in your experience creating Israel's national cybersecurity policies, how can compliance help provide confidence that MSPs are more secure? And how can this provide more confidence to the customers, and so on and so on and so on?
Yeah. So I think that companies are looking for guidance. And what the Cybersecurity Directorate in Israel trying to build a doctrine for small and medium businesses, because if you're taking the NIST, for example, is quite...
Oh, did we lose you? we may have lost him.
Maybe the internet went down over the Atlantic.
Oh, well, yeah. Hey, BGP, or is it DNS, or is it both? David, I'm not sure if you can hear us or not, but maybe if you bounce out and bounce back in, that might be helpful. Steve, do you have a way to ping him outside of Zoom?
Yeah, I can drop him a quick email. I'll do that now.
That'd be great. That'd be great. So while we're waiting for David to come back to us, let me kind of regroup and circle back where we are and, the whole idea of what we're talking about, and that is value add for your MSP, right? And the value add for your MSP is adding vCISO services, adding that leadership role at your MSP, not only to get your own house in order and get your own ducks in a row, but to work with your clients to get their ducks in a row, to get their house in order, to meet their regulatory or compliance or contractual obligations. Wow, I said that without spitting my words out. And helping them stay more cyber aware, cyber secure. I mean, it's October, it's Cyber Awareness Month, blah, 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 all that gory details. But the point that I'm trying to make is that most MSPs that are 5 to 10 employees or smaller, 20, maybe even the 20 to 30 ones or smaller, these smaller to mid-size MSPs probably don't have the human capital internally to offer these services, not only to yourself but to your clients. And if you do, they're usually stretched pretty thin. Right. So this is where something, and Steve's here and can kind of fill in where David was in a bad internet connection there in Israel, where
there's several different advantages. One of them is we find MSPs using Cynomi on their own systems, on their own processes, right? On their own, like you guys do, getting their own houses in order. And then the second thing is using the tools for clients. So to leverage your time, your skills, to leverage their IT people, to stretch them further than they would normally get, provide them more expertise than they could possibly manage at a price that's relatively reasonable, and then drive more services for the MSP. So the MSPs can add, project-based services, related to security. So looks like David is back.
Yeah. I'm back. Sorry, it was automatically reset of my Mac.
Fun.
Yeah, in the middle of it. It's the first time it happens to me in the middle of the Zoom.
Welcome back. So, hey, what happens to the best of us? At first, I was blaming Facebook and DNS and BGP and everybody else and WhatsApp, but doesn't matter. So let me regroup to figure out where we were and what we were talking about. I think what we were talking about was how Israel's cybersecurity policies and compliance can help build the confidence of not just MSPs, but to their clients and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And is there a parallel in the US? So could the US benefit from some of those general?
Yeah, actually, I see this in Israel, in the UK, and in the US. I saw it when I was in the Cybersecurity Directorate. We had a strong relationship with all these governmental that trying to raise the awareness, trying to give more instructions and guidance to the industry, to the SMBs. And what we try to do in Israel, which is not really different, to make a methodology which will be easy to maintain, easy to use by the market, by the SMBs, and by the MSPs. And we see that the same thing is going in the UK, for example, Cyber Essential, which is a set of smaller instructions or recommendation to follow, and it becomes a standard. We see it, I think, with the NIST, and now I guess that Tim, you can talk about CMMC a lot and what it changes the everything is, and so I guess that government can certainly change the way that we do security with the compliance. In Israel, lots of people think that there should be more compliant in order to enforce better security.
Mhm.
And what I really think, and I think that Tim, we just talked about that, about insurance. I think this is the major vector that will change.
Mhm.
It will be stronger than government, stronger than compliant. It's just money talks. And you get attacked, you want to be protected, you must be, or you want to be insured, and in order to be insured, you must be protected. And you will be protected because the probability to get hit is so high that you must have insurance. And I guess that if you're talking about the attack chain and the supply chain, your customers will enforce you to be insured. So it's like a rolling ball that everything now have to be connected.
It does. So let's just talk about some overlaps here, right? So, you know, us here in the US, we look at NIST, we look at CIS, we look at HIPAA, we look at high tech, fintech, high trust, blah blah. This framework, that framework, blah blah blah. There's, I had a really good debate going on LinkedIn a couple months ago about, will the real framework please stand up? You mentioned CMMC, NIST 171, the FAR, mouthful of all these acronyms here in the US. In my pseudo professional opinion, like a lot of things boil down to NIST 853, right? A lot of the varying frameworks that are out there kind of start at or look to or align with 853. So I'm wondering, in your case there in Israel, I presume that there's some alignment along 853 or SOC, ISO or whatever.
Yeah. Actually, the cyber methodology is based on the NIST.
Mm-hmm.
However, for compliant, if you want to be compliant, you usually it's the ISO. So currently, it's a recommendation. All the Israeli Cyber Directorate methodology is based on NIST, but it is a best practice or recommendation. And if you want to be compliant, you should do the ISO, or there is a privacy law, which is not as powerful as the GDPR or the California law.
Right.
But I think it's more of the same. At ISO is, you can map NIST to the ISO, you can map it to the CIS 20, and everything is connected.
Yeah.
So and when people tell me what should be, which framework I should use, I tell them that just pick one. It doesn't matter which one, just pick one.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, we had a really great conversation with Huntress actually a couple of weeks ago with Wes from Huntress, and we kind of nailed him down. It's like, hey, what do you think? And like you said, pick one, do something, start someplace, go somewhere, like start doing something, right? And so us as the compliancy guys started in September. We kicked off the, getting your house in order, and we picked CIS Top 18. It's interesting because since we've started this process of going through week after week all the controls in CIS 18 amongst our peer group, I'm seeing in the space CIS taking a much more, thanks Matt, see you later, a much more prevalent role, like even above and beyond 853 or SOC or ISO or whatever. Like they're, quote, starting to make a more name for themselves as a place to start for your compliance needs. And so it's just interesting to see there's so many frameworks. There's so many controls amongst frameworks that all do the same kinds of things at a bare minimum, don't get me wrong. like you said, pick something, start someplace, even internally. Stopgap those, red, yellow, greens along the way. Come up with some kind of POAM, plan of action milestones. Come up with something. Spend some time. And if you need help and accountability and growth and guidance, you have people like David and myself. You have Tsunami and the compliancy guys at your disposal to be able to help in this process, right? So I want to be cognizant there's about 5 minutes left. Steve, is there anything that you want to share?
Well, yeah. So just to tag on to the point you just made, part of it is just driving the process, right? Someone needs to own the process, whether it's internal or external. And part of the value that you guys provide is not just the expertise around cybersecurity and compliancy, but also you're there every week, right, to make a little incremental gain and make sure that the executives and the owners of the client organizations have bought in, are committed, and are going to get to the finish line, which keeps moving out, right, as you make more and more progress. So my quick point on that. Yeah, other than that, the world is changing very quickly. A couple quick data points. There is a international council on cybersecurity that's going to be held coming up in the next few weeks, and it'll be interesting to see what all the governments come together to come up with a policy around ransomware, right? And who participates and who doesn't. Yeah. Whether the Chinese and the Soviet or the Russians show up. And then the cyber insurance thing seems to change every week. There seems to be a new partnership, whether it's a Microsoft or, one of the big insurance companies procuring a marketplace. So anyway, so everyone I think on this call is plugged in and tuned in. I think we just need to keep sharing information because things are changing very quickly and we could all benefit from those learnings. So with that, I'll pass it back.
Yeah, the insurance piece is I've been saying it for a long time. The buck stops with the person paying the bill, right? We can put in as many frameworks as we want, but until something has teeth and there's money tied to that teeth, things won't really change, right? I personally think that the insurance company who's paying out or not paying out or insuring or not insuring these organizations will be a huge driving factor on what actually gets implemented, what can actually be held accountable and not accountable. It'll just be, I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. I'm also really nervous to see where this is going to go. The nervous part is I've been adhering to 853 for a moderate baseline system since Rev 2, and I've been progressing every year all the way through Rev 5 now. And so I feel like my house and my clients' houses are in order to the best of our ability and financial perspective around that ROI. But I work with so many MSPs that even struggle spelling the word NIST. No, they're awesome. They're amazing. They're very technical. They have their crap together on the technical side. But if you ask them about a disaster recovery plan, many probably don't have it. And that's why, we're here to help with that. So I want to take the last 2 or 3 minutes. I want both Steve and David to kind of wrap us up around Tsunami. I keep pronouncing it wrong because Cynomi, thank you. And tell us, like, what is the specific offer? You don't have to talk about pricing, but you can talk about what is it? What can MSPs do with it today? And how can it help them grow their MSP business? And you can take 5 or so minutes to wrap that up.
Steve, should I begin or you want to begin?
Fire away, David.
Okay. So, as we said, we are trying to give the IT in the MSP or the cyber team the ability to give virtual CISO service. And when we say virtual CISO, we mean not the ability to assess the cyber posture the clients of the MSP, to understand the gaps, to understand the risk assessment, and to be able to produce a plan, prioritized plan, and to be able to go to the customer and say, okay, these are your gaps, these are your risks. You should do this first and then second, etc. How we do that? We are trying to collect as much data as we can, and then use our AI algorithms in order to do this prioritization and generate the framework, which is based on the NIST, which is simplified for the SMB and MSP world. We are scanning the infrastructure from inside Office 365, and we have also the capability to do it inside if you want. Not in all cases it's necessary. Taking all this data, we produce policies automatically, and we produce a plan. What is really great about Cynomi, that it's not only a tool that you use for after convincing your client because he needs cybersecurity assessment or for his regulation, etc. We have fast scanning tools that enable us or enable the MSP to demonstrate some of the gaps to his prospects. So using Cynomi, it's not only risk assessment or virtual CISO tools, it's also can be a sales tool in order to find some vulnerabilities, to do really fast, which is not a thorough, which is not 100% cover everything, but it gives you some insights about your website or your domain. So usually when you are so bad in something in one, you are so bad in other things which are not covered in our fast test. So this is Cynomi. We also have nice reports which are generated automatically, and graphs and nice dashboard. We are in the SaaS, AWS, hosted in the US. So very easy, very friendly. Steve, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I said my 2 cents on top of that would be, I mean, yes, there is a huge value in terms of improved security posture, but there's also a big value in terms of time saved and money saved, right? So if you're stretched thin and you need a way to, you know, get more bang for your buck, Cynomi can definitely help you with that. And then the last value prop point is justifying budget, right? So if you're working with a small, you know, company client, and they're not quite sure what they should be spending their precious few dollars on, the dashboards and the reports that David mentioned demonstrate very clearly, very simply, you have a vulnerability, this is red, this is critical, you got a big problem here, Mr. Client, and you know, you should prioritize this to get it done right away. Gotcha. So there are multiple value points, and last thing I guess I would just make sure is everybody who's going to Datacom next week, come by the Cynomi booth. So maybe, with that, you know, thanks.
Maybe more as if somebody from the participants wants to get a free this fast assessment report for himself or or a customer, just tell us and we'll be happy to do so.
Awesome. So what I'll do is, and thank you so much for kind of recapping all of that, right? So you do have some tools, and those tools work in conjunction with with Microsoft and Azure, and generating stuff and creating policy, and so there's some automation to what it is that you guys have to offer. I think possibly a next great step would be for us to possibly do like maybe a live demo with the group at some point, right? And so people can kind of see what this stuff is, right? I'm just gonna peek over at chat real quick. Yeah, so Datacom is virtual this year. They are having a virtual booth there. If you wanted to get a demo, then go jump in Datacom. And I believe Datacom is free to attend. Is that correct, Steve?
That's correct.
Yeah, so you can actually, and yeah, I'm not going to go down that road. But yeah, go. No, I was going to talk a little bit about Datto, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But anyways, what I was going to say is, stop by and check them out. And, if you want, set up a demo. And if you want, kind of get together with them and look at what they have to offer. So, yeah, I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up. I don't see any other questions in the chat or in the poll.
So Tim, huge thank you for setting this up, for running this, for hosting this. So we just want to say thanks.
Of course.
For excellent partnership as well.
Well, it's all about collaboration, right? As I think somebody said it before, there's plenty of fish in the sea and there's never enough fishermen. My job is to help teach you how to fish and teach these MSPs how to fish. And in the event that they don't want to fish themselves, they have people like David and myself to fish for them.
From fishing to fishing.
Exactly. I think we said that in the beginning. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, if that's it, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and we'll let people gracefully leave. And